Good day, Monty High. Today is an A Day, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tomorrow is September 11th, 2021, and September 11th is a day that has a special and tragic significance in our history. It was just 20 years ago, on September 11th, 2001, when 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airliners and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C., and the 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. Often referred to as 9/11, the attacks resulted in extensive death and destruction, triggering major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism and defining the presidency of George W. Bush. Over 3,000 people were killed during the attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C., including more than 400 police officers and firefighters. The following is the account of the events that day as described on the History Channel website. On September 11, 2001, at 8:45 a.m., on a clear Tuesday morning, an American Airlines Boeing 767, loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact left a gaping, burning hole near the 80th floor of the 110-story skyscraper, instantly killing hundreds of people and trapping hundreds more in higher floors. As the evacuation of the tower and its twin got underway, television cameras broadcasted live images of what initially appeared to be a freak accident. Then, 18 minutes after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767, United Airlines Flight 175, appeared out of the sky, turned sharply toward the World Trade Center, and sliced into the South Tower near the 60th floor. The collision caused a massive explosion that showered burning debris over surrounding buildings and the streets below. America was under attack. The attackers were Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and several other Arab nations. Reportedly financed by Saudi fugitive Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda terrorist organization, they were allegedly acting in retaliation for America's support of Israel, its involvement in the Persian Gulf War, and its continued military presence in the Middle East. Some of the terrorists had lived in the United States for more than a year and had taken flying lessons at American commercial flight schools. Others had slipped into the country in the months before September 11 and acted as the muscle in the operation. The 19 terrorists smuggled box cutters and knives through security at 3 East Coast airports and boarded 4 flights bound for California, chosen because the planes were loaded with fuel for the long transcontinental journey. Soon after takeoff, the terrorists commandeered the 4 planes and took the controls, transforming ordinary commuter jets into guided missiles. As millions watched the events unfolding in New York, American Airlines Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington, D.C., and slammed into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m. Jet fuel from the Boeing 757 caused a devastating inferno that led to the structural collapse of a portion of the giant concrete building. All told, 125 military personnel and civilians were killed in the Pentagon, along with all 64 people aboard the airliner. Less than 15 minutes after the terrorists struck the nerve center of the U.S. military, the horror in New York took a catastrophic turn for the worse when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in a massive cloud of dust and smoke. The structural steel of the skyscraper, built to withstand winds in excess of 200 miles an hour and a large conventional fire, could not withstand the tremendous heat generated by the burning jet fuel. At 10:30 a.m., the other Trade Center tower collapsed. Close to 3,000 people died in the World Trade Center and its vicinity, including a staggering 343 firefighters and paramedics, 23 New York City police officers, and 37 Port Authority police officers who were struggling to complete an evacuation of the buildings and save the office workers trapped on higher floors. Only 6 people in the World Trade Center towers at the time of the collapse survived. Almost 10,000 others were treated for injuries, many severe. Meanwhile, a 4th California-bound plane, United Flight 93, was hijacked about 40 minutes after leaving Newark International Airport in New Jersey. Because the plane had been delayed in taking off, passengers on board learned of events in New York and Washington via cell phone and airphone calls to the ground. Knowing that the aircraft was not returning to an airport as the hijackers claimed, a group of passengers and flight attendants planned an insurrection. The passengers fought the 4 hijackers and are suspected to have attacked the cockpit with a fire extinguisher. The plane then flipped over and sped toward the grounds at upwards of 500 miles per hour, crashing in a rural field in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. All 45 people aboard were killed. Its intended target is unknown, but theories include the White House, the U.S. Capitol, the Camp David presidential retreat in Maryland, or one of several nuclear power plants along the eastern seaboard. At 7 p.m., President George W. Bush, who had spent the day being shuttled around the country because of security concerns, returned to the White House. At 9 p.m., he delivered a televised address from the Oval Office, declaring, "Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve." In a reference to the eventual U.S. military response, he declared, "We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them." Operation Enduring Freedom, the American-led international effort to oust the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and destroy Osama bin Laden's terrorist network based there, began October 7, 2001. Within 2 months, U.S. forces had effectively removed the Taliban from operational power, but the war continued. As U.S. and coalition forces attempted to defeat a Taliban insurgency campaign based in neighboring Pakistan. Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks, remained at large until May 2, 2011, when he was finally tracked down and killed by U.S. forces at a hideout in Pakistan. In June of 2011, President Barack Obama announced the beginning of large-scale troop withdrawals from Afghanistan. There are some of us in this building, some of us in your classroom, and maybe even you, who have been directly affected by the September 11th terrorist attacks. Perhaps a family member or a friend of the family knows someone who died on that day. Perhaps a family member or friend of the family has served overseas in the military in Iraq or Afghanistan. As for me, after the World Trade Center collapse in Manhattan, I stood at the rubble and among the dust-strewn roads, vehicles, and buildings where the World Trade Centers had stood. I provided security around the Trade Center site and nearby Battery Park. I witnessed New York City come together to support one another. I was awarded the New York State Defensive Liberty Medal for my service in the security operations at Ground Zero. Afterwards, I deployed and served in Iraq during and after the invasion in 2003, earning, among other medals, the Iraqi Freedom Medal and a Presidential Unit Citation while serving as a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps Infantry. I am proud to have served with brave men and women, some of whom gave their lives in service to this country. There are many who have a story of how September 11th has changed their lives, and the events have certainly changed how we live our lives since. Please join me in a moment of remembrance for all those whose lives were impacted by these events on September 11th, 2001. Thank you, Monty I. Be courageous and honorable in act and in thought. Pursue your greatness. Be nice and make this world a better place. We love and believe in you, Monty I. Make it a great day and be your best self.